All right, let's talk about the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake. Today, we're going to try and untangle this giant web of rumors, leaks, and official non-denials to figure out what's fact and what's pure fiction.
And honestly, this quote pretty much says it all. If you've spent any time on gaming forums or social media, you know it feels like everyone is talking about this remake. There's just so much chatter, so many breadcrumbs. But from Ubisoft itself, almost total silence.
So, to make sense of all this, here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to start with the hard evidence, the few things Ubisoft has actually said. Then, we'll follow the trail of some pretty credible insider leaks. And finally, we'll get into the real heart of the debate. What kind of game is this remake even going to be?
Okay, so first things first, before we get into all the speculation, let's look at what's actually on the record. These are the official, even if they're, a little vague, clues that Ubisoft has left for us. This is the foundation that every other rumor's built on top of.
When you lay it out like this, you can see a really interesting pattern forming. First, the CEO basically confirms the strategy. They're going to remake older games. Then, bam, a financial report has this perfect little slot for an unannounced title. And then, the weirdest one, the Black Flag soundtrack gets re-uploaded and they blame a technical issue. Right. So while none of these say Black Flag remake, it's like they've built the perfect-sized box for this remake to fit into.
All right, so that's the official stuff. Now let's move on. If Ubisoft's comments were the kindling, then all the reports from industry insiders, well, that's the smoke that really suggests there's a fire somewhere.
And what's so interesting here is how all these different reports kind of line up. You've got multiple credible sources all saying, yep, this remake is real. But then you have Insider Gaming getting super specific, talking about a target release week in March 2026. Others are a bit more cautious on the date, but they all agree on one thing. The project exists.
And then there was this whole thing with the Peggy listing, which just poured gasoline on the fire. For a little bit, the title Black Flag Remix supposedly showed up on the official European Ratings Board website. And for anyone who follows this stuff, you know a ratings board listing is usually the final signpost before a big announcement. But then, poof, it just vanished. And then you got stuff like this, which is just perfect. The original voice actor for Edward Kenway, Matt Ryan, dropped this little gem to a fan at a convention. It's that classic, I'm not supposed to say anything, so I'm going to say just enough to get everyone talking kind of move. But see, this is the follow-up that makes it so believable. You don't just casually mention that corporate lawyers are on your case if you were just kidding around. This really suggests he's under an NDA for this project, said a little too much, and got a serious slap on the wrist for it, which of course makes his original hint seem way more legitimate. Okay, so at this point it feels less like a question of if the remake is happening, and more a question of what is it actually going to be? And that, my friends, leads us to the most divisive, most passionate rumors of them all, how the game is going to play. So this right here, this is the heart of the debate for so many fans. The leaks are pretty consistent on this. They're pointing to a major overhaul. We're talking about maybe cutting the modern-day Abstergo story entirely. But the big one, the really controversial one, is the potential shift away from that classic combo-based combat to a full-on RPG system. Like we saw in Origins and Valhalla, with loot, different tiers of gear, and all those stats. And that really brings us to the core question, doesn't it? This is what's splitting the community right down the middle. You've got one camp that just wants a faithful remaster, the same game they loved, just with a beautiful new coat of paint. And then you've got the other camp that's excited for a total modern reimagining with all the new systems. And look, when we say RPG heavy, it's really important to get what that could actually mean. We're not just talking about combat. The rumors suggest a fundamental change to how you progress in the game. Think less about hunting specific animals for a specific upgrade, and more about the endless loot and crafting loops and stat builds we saw in games like Odyssey. So, after following all these breadcrumbs, the official hints, the insider leaks, the swirling gameplay rumors, where does that actually leave us right now? Let's try to put all these pieces of the puzzle together and see what the map looks like. Okay, so here's the bottom line. What we know for sure is that Ubisoft has confirmed a strategy of making remakes, and they've confirmed a slot for a mystery game. On top of that, we have some very specific, though unconfirmed, reports that this game is the Black Flag remake. And then there's a whole lot of circumstantial evidence backing that up. But the biggest question of all, what the gameplay will actually feel like, that is still pure speculation. And so, at the end of the day, it all comes down to this one big question, and I'm really asking you, what do you hope to see when the ship finally sails into port?
Do you want a faithful recreation of a classic you already love? Or are you ready for a bold reimagining for a whole new generation of pirates?